Hi, good afternoon, good morning, good evening, whatever time of the day you're listening to us. My name is Trisha Hazarika, and today I am collaborating with M, as I call her. M and me, both of us work in the exact same field. M is a sales coach based in the UK, and I'm here based in the region Dubai. I would let M do a little introduction, and today we're going to talk all about sales.
Hmm. Perfect. Well, Trisha, thank you so much for having me. So, hi, my name is or Emily Bastrup. I am the co-founder of Growth Debunked, and my business specifically focuses on helping post-sales teams, so organizations, once the customer has signed, to develop, grow, and embed those customer relationships and build the commercial skills and partnership skills for teams that are facing customers. So, I'm delighted to be joining Trisha today and speaking to all you all.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. In fact, a lot of times when I speak to potential clients or sales leaders, I would say the whole emphasis when it comes to coaching goes on, hey, we have a lot of new joiners. We don't have time to train them. So obviously we need sales training. So that's a piece of work that I get. The second piece of work is the actual new business team. So the new business team could be inbound team or outbound team. Inbound is obviously they have like a conversion target. Outbound has more of dollar target or revenue target, but very less emphasis that I get to hear on the post sales or the account management or the customer success, as you rightly say. And what are your experiences? Do you kind of come across these conversations very often, or do you kind of ignite that, um, the whole thing in the client?
It's a great question. So, most of the time, and most organizations will focus their energy on their sales teams and on the new business. That's always
Mm,
been the beacon. Obviously, new business as the lifeblood of revenue, as lifeblood of the business.
mm-hmm,
But post sales and intentionally looking after that as a revenue engine is actually much newer than sales. So that's why it's not come up naturally. And it's something that I'm actually pushing as a point of view.
mm-hmm,
Why is that? Because if you've done all the hard work of bringing in a new customer, what's
mm-hmm,
important as for sales leaders to understand is, particularly if you're selling to large enterprise customers, it typically costs twice as much for your company per dollar of revenue that you're bringing into the business. So if you're signing $100,000 contract, that is costing your business at least 200,000 in cost. So the cost is from marketing, it's from your sales salaries, it's from sales commission, all of these other things, which means that
mm-hmm.
unless that customer stays with you for 2 years, you've actually
You've lost.
lost money, even though on the top line it's showing that you've brought in 100,000 in revenue,
Mm,
you've actually lost 200,000 in the process,
oh
or
my God.
100,000 if they drop after 1 year.
Mm,
So it's actually creating that awareness that it's not just enough to bring a customer in, you
mm-hmm,
have to create an experience that makes them want to stay
mm-hmm,
and makes them want to grow with you. Because again, new business from your existing customers
mm-hmm,
costs half as much as new business from brand new logos. So if you want to create a profit in your business,
mm-hmm.
you need to be much more intentional about how you keep and grow your existing customers. And customer success has a big role to play in that, essentially to create an experience that maximizes the value from the product, but also to
Mm-hmm.
collaborate with your sales teams when they identify that there's an opportunity. So that collaboration piece, I think, is untapped and
Mm-hmm.
starting to come on the radar.
That's amazing, and that's a very good example that you actually mentioned. I remember before we had this conversation. I mean, before we had this recording, you spoke about how you identify when you walk in. How do you identify will, skill, and hill? It's such an interesting, perception. But can you tell us more about it?
Yes. So I love it because it's a very simple framework to
Mm-hmm.
understand what's going on and what we need to go and fix before we start.
Yeah.
And particularly when we have an issue, whether it's a sales team or a customer success team, any team actually, where we go, something's not working, the team's not performing.
Mm-hmm.
And let's diagnose. So using this will, skill, and hill tool, we diagnose what the root cause problem is. So will and skill are more of an individual piece. Hill is more organizational. So I'll break those down. The first thing we want to evaluate if we're looking at a person and saying, well, that person's not performing where they need to be, is will. So will would be do they have the will to do the job that they're being
Mm,
asked to do?
mm,
And if there's a mismatch, if you have an SDR who hates picking up the phone, that's a problem. Like they
mm,
hate their job and
mm,
therefore then they don't want to do it. They're forcing themselves. That
mm,
is probably just a not good fit between the individual and the job they're in. And
mhm,
that's actually probably worth having an honest conversation
mm,
about. So the second piece is then the more common one that people think is the problem, which is skills. So
mm,
our team is not performing, and it's because they don't have the skills, they don't have the capabilities. They're willing, they want to perform.
mm,
There's just a gap there. So that's where coaching, training, also creating on the job and experiential learning, getting them a chance to practice new skills to grow confidence.
mhm,
That's really what's going to make a difference.
mhm,
However, the most common challenge is the hill, and that's the one that leaders probably try and shy away from because it's the hardest work. The hill is actually that your organization, your systems, your processes, your incentives are not designed to enable your team to perform at their best.
mm,
So you're asking them to generate activity rather than outcomes. And so you're biasing the behaviors that they make towards underperformance because you're not basically encouraging or recognizing the right behaviors,
mhm,
or your processes are unclear, unstructured, or you have no processes, or the process just doesn't make sense.
mm,
That actually creates friction for the individuals. It makes it harder for them to perform their job. Also, if there's a lack of collaboration between the team, because the way that you're structured, it feels like, again, sales members might think that they have to compete against each other to be able to succeed. That's a very common one, particularly in
mm,
sales. So that is not an individual problem. Your system
mhm,
has created an environment that is basically telling people that the only way to win is to win at the detriment of their colleagues.
mm,
And so that requires a complete rewiring of how your sales organization, but probably your broader organization needs to function.
mhm,
And that's deep transformational work that you need to do as a business to
mhm.
be able to find that additional performance.
That's amazing. But do you help in, setting up this whole transformation, or are you specifically focused on, okay, when there is a skill issue, I can show up and I can solve the problem. But when it comes to the hill issue, are you able to also get your hands dirty and solve the problem?
Hill is my favorite base to go and spend some time. And I've actually designed a three-step process for organizations to overcome the hill. And depending on the size and complexity, so
Mhm,
this is relevant, ironically, between any size, I would say, whether you're $3 to $5 million of turnover or hundreds of millions, it's
mhm,
often the same problems with different scale.
mhm,
So the idea is I follow a three-step process, which the first one is called align. And this is where we need to make sure that we have a common view of the world before we can make any change. So what I typically do is I actually have a meeting with senior leaders, not just sales, but
mhm,
sales, product, tech. You need all of the key leaders together to say, do you have a common understanding of your goals and your
mhm,
vision? Do
mhm,
you have a common understanding of what good looks like?
mhm,
And do you have a common agreement for what needs to change? Because if the leadership team does not agree and not have a common view,
mhm.
anything you do afterwards is going to fail because it's just
Absolutely.
going to,
Not
that's the thing. So
sustainable. Yeah.
you start at the top and then you actually talk to the people at the front line
Mm,
to get information on their experience as employees. And that's what tells you where the friction lies.
mm,
And we also look at data, for example, sales calls, customer calls, ideally talking to customers so that we
mhm,
get a full 360 view.
mhm,
And that allows us to get a blueprint of the customer experience and
mhm,
where every team sits in terms of driving it or hindering it. So
mhm,
it shows you what's working and what's not. And
mhm,
often what doesn't work is where two teams need to collaborate and they're not. So the handoff between the teams
mhm,
just doesn't exist or doesn't work. Think about a contract gets signed, the handoff to the post-sales team. That's a very
mhm,
common one that doesn't work
mhm,
well and
mhm,
causes issues. The second piece is then to redesign something important. So rather than telling people what needs to change, you put the people who are dealing with the process on a day-to-day basis in a room together,
Mm-hmm.
and you facilitate for them to co-create the change that they're going to be responsible for. So bottom up, because they know best where the friction lies.
Yeah,
And if they are creating the change, they are much more accountable and more likely to embrace it than if it comes from the top.
that's
And only
amazing.
then do we think about capability build. And there I
Mm-hmm.
focus more on customer success
Mm-hmm.
because I feel they are the interface between your existing customers and the rest of the business. So, are they able to articulate strategically what a customer needs,
Mm-hmm.
translate a product to the strategic priorities of the business? And do they have the credibility to bring in the right people from the business in front of the customers
Mm-hmm.
with the right message and the right contextualization? So that, for example, if sales is showing up in front of a customer that's ready to grow, they have the full context, they know exactly what's going on, and they can really position themselves as a natural follow up to the work that's been done. So that's the step process. So essentially, it is transformational, but I strongly believe that capability on its own, if you're not doing the deep work of understanding where your organizational challenges live,
Mm-hmm.
it's just like a sticking plaster. You're not going to fundamentally fix the performance.
Right. And why do you think a lot of sales leaders or sales organizations and do not believe in hiring an external coach to do this, and they feel like they can take it on themselves and solve the problem?
That's a great question. I think because there's also a lot of pressure that's been put on you. I think we need to take some empathy here, which is if you're brought in as a sales leader, there is an expectation that you know everything,
Mm-hmm.
that you can do everything. But also, what's the definition of a sales leader? Like, can you build the strategic revenue plan, think about all the structure and the systems that you need to put in place so that your team performs well?
Mm-hmm.
Be coaching, hiring people. I think there is this expectation that I need to do it on my own to prove my own performance.
Yeah,
And I think there's a mindset of asking for help that, particularly sometimes in sales, we're not so good at because we want to show up as confident and in control of the situation. And actually, I think that's something to work towards. It's okay to ask for help. It's okay to say, I don't have everything figured out. And I would say some of the best leaders are the ones who are transparent about that. And that creates more positive authority
mm,
than kind of pretending that you know everything. And then your team will know when something's not quite right. So
y-
I would invite sales leaders to really consider how they can lean into their zone of genius. And if coaching isn't one of them, bring in someone great who complements your skill set and can
mm.
accelerate the changes you want to make in your organization.
That's so amazing. Thank you very much. We have less than a minute left. We've chatted, guys. We've chatted before hit the record button. But thank you so much, M, for your time. I really, really appreciate it. And I hope everyone listening it really enjoyed that conversation.
Thanks for having me, Trish.
Thank you. Bye-bye. Speak soon.
Bye.
Bye.